Hi everybody, in today's video we're going to wrap up chapter 2, but we're going to do so with at least one worthwhile feature, and that's this player spawn point, which will allow us to place a spawn point in the world, and then when we run that level we can drop right in where we put that little spawn position, and this will work across your game in any scene. So if you want to learn how to do that, then please stay tuned. Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. Alright, welcome back everybody. So with this episode, we're going to wrap up our chapter 2, the world building foundations. And I hope it wasn't a misnomer. Really the goal of this chapter, right, was to start talking about how to build levels, and there was a pretty heavy emphasis on how to make them visually appealing and how to focus on a lot of the visual aspects of building these levels. As we wrap it up, there's two technical things I want to address. One is kind of like a defect or a bug that we have in our area transition, so we'll address that first. And then following that, I want to build a player spawn node that we can use so that instead of placing our player here in every level, we can just kind of drop in one of these player spawn nodes and it will react accordingly. If the player's not there, we'll spawn a new one, but if he is, it just won't do anything. So that'll work kind of like the player already does, but I think it's a better way to handle it than dropping in an instance of the player into each level. And then on top of that, what I really want to focus on in this chapter is really maybe some more conceptual stuff and give some ideas and pointers to you guys as you start building levels for your games. Because one thing that we've done so far in this series is we built our basic working character, and then we started building these levels, but we really got into the visual aspect of it. That's kind of backwards in some ways, but it's also useful. We can treat what we've done so far in this series as kind of like a vertical slice of our game. We're kind of proving out the concept and building all the basics to have a fully functional game. But you don't want to put tons of work into the visual and art of a game front-loaded like this, because you may be putting a lot of work into things that are going to be removed due to decisions made later during your game development process. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that in today's episode. Okay, I want to begin with this level transition issue that was pointed out to me by a user in the Discord channel and kind of debugged and diagnosed by James Nye, who's one of my moderators in the Discord community and a longtime supporter of my channel. So thank you, James. I want to just look at this level transition node. Now you can see in here in our script, we've got these setter functions, right? On both our size and our location. And they call this apply area settings. And what that means is anytime we change one of the settings, like I guess I should look at this from the perspective of a level. Anytime we, whoa, that guy's, it's hidden, it's in the back. Anytime we change the size or location, it's going to update our collider, right? It's going to update this area transition, and that's fine. It works fine. And essentially what happens is every time we load the level, it just takes these settings, and because we've set some of these, it's going to call that apply area settings method whenever this is instantiated, as long as we've done one thing, and that's change either the size or the location. You just have to change at least one of them. But actually there's an issue if you change neither of them. So if you leave both of these at the default, then it's not ever going to call that apply settings. And so your transition might not work properly for your level. Now, to be fair, this may or may not be an issue for you in your game and how things are positioned, but I just want to look at this so that it's addressed. Then if anybody's had an issue with this, you can hopefully fix it. And really the fix is super straightforward. We just need to make sure that we call this apply area settings regardless. So we can just come down here to our ready function, and then I'll just come down here right after our is editor hint check, and we just need to call apply area settings. Okay, simple as that. So anytime we run the project or load a level or a scene or whatever, and it's got one of these in here, it will call that area settings function regardless, and that will fix that issue. So if any of you have that problem, go ahead and make that minor modification to your script and you should be good to go. And I'm just going to make a little note to you guys. This is, I think, one of maybe numerous reasons why YouTubers don't often make these long-running series. One is because you're going to build imperfect code, and at some point it becomes hard to maintain or to keep up with the bug reports and things like that. But I think it's useful to see that these kind of things happen and creep up, and this is natural. Now, the other reason why I think a lot of YouTubers don't do these kind of long-running series is because they don't see that this can help teach people how to use Godot and how to script. And I think there's actually some value to that because it can be a crutch, right? You guys can just follow along everything I do. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you have no idea why it doesn't work, right? But what I hope out of this series is that those of you who are following along begin to develop the ability to recognize issues through some of the things I teach you. And even if you disagree with what I do, you kind of learn to watch how I work. You start to develop your own process for writing code, for debugging. And pretty soon you're going to start to recognize how the engine works, how the nodes work, how the scripts that we're writing work. And you're going to be able to devise and create your own solutions. And that's when you really start learning, when you start creating your own solutions. So just a word of encouragement to those of you who are struggling but trying. Trust me, if you keep at it, then it will work for you. You will learn and you will become some sort of game developer, right? So just keep at it. Okay, now let's look at this character spawner thing that I want to create. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here. I've got a player in each of my scenes so that I could test it. I'm going to actually delete the player node from each of my levels. I don't really like the idea of embedding this. Now, some of you might build a game where you do this, and that's okay. We've developed a system where we're kind of keeping our player scene persistent and moving him, right, as we transition levels. So it's just a different approach. I don't believe there's any right or wrong way to do this. It's kind of based on preference and how you understand and build your own systems, right? But what happens is if we remove the player from these scenes, let's say I want to run this scene and test it, then what's going to happen is now we have no player, right? So it'll just start us in the level and we can see the level and that's all great. I mean, even our level 1 right now, if I hit F5 and run the project, because I've removed that player from the scene, it's got no player, okay? Which is kind of cool. I mean, it highlights the modular nature of how these nodes and scenes work in Godot because our scene still loads just fine. Our player and our level are separate entities. They can exist with or without each other. But what we want is we want a smart connection between the two. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll start. I'm going to just add a new node 2D. And I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it PlayerSpawn. And what we'll do is I'm going to add a Sprite 2D node as the child of this. And with this Sprite 2D node, I want to load my player sprite sheet. So I'm just going to click the little folder for quick load and find hero. Okay. And we just need to remember, right, we need to configure this because we only want to see one frame of it. I think it was 16 across. Is that right? Yeah, looks like it. 4 tall. Okay, so we've got a little player in here. I'm going to go ahead and drag his feet up to the bottom of this. So now that we've got this player spawn, it kind of matches how our player would look, right? But I'm going to take my Sprite 2D. I'm going to modulate it really quick. So I'm going to come down here to modulate. Everything related to my player level transition, movement, spawning, I'm kind of using this kind of bright minty green color. So I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to give it some intensity so that it's kind of like a bright color. Just hopefully to help it stand out a little bit. I think a good even 2 on the eye is good there. Okay, there we go. Now we've got this hopefully somewhat obvious player spawn. I think one thing we should do is we want to make sure that this is maybe always visible in case there's foreground elements. So I'm going to go ahead and come down to ordering and I'm give this a Z index of like 100 or something. So it's really high, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to use this node to spawn or instantiate a player if one doesn't already exist, okay? And it also needs to be smart enough to know that if a player does exist, then we don't need to spawn one. In addition to that, we don't want to see this in-game, so our code on this scene will also be able to disable the visibility or even remove this from the game, depending on how you want to handle it, okay? But before we do that, let's go ahead and let's create a scene from this. So I'm going to go here and say save branch as scene and player spawn is good. Where I want to save this though, I want to go up to, I've got this general folder and let's create a new folder in here and I'm going to call it player spawn. This is actually cool. I think this is a newer feature. Reset position, rotation or scale. We want to make sure reset position is checked. What that will do is even though I've moved my guy around here, right? He's got a transform of 81, 156. If I look at the scene, it should be 0, 0. Yeah. I know I've run into this in the past, and I don't recall when this was introduced. So, I mean, it could have been a year ago. I don't know, and I just haven't noticed it. But it could inherit that. In fact, typically in the older versions I was used to, this position would have been saved into this new scene. And then that's annoying because then you drag and drop it into a level and you're like, where is it? Why is it offset, right? Because he would be like way down here instead of at the origin, okay? So we've got this player spawn set up. Let's go ahead and let's create a new script as well. We need to attach a script to this. And because we've already saved this in a folder, it should be good. We'll leave it called PlayerSpawn, save it in the folder, and we're good to go. Now let's give this a class name, and I'll just call it PlayerSpawn. Okay, it's a node 2D. I also want to give this an icon so that we can identify it quickly from our inspector. And let's see, the icon, we should have that in our general icons folder. This little PlayerSpawn thing is kind of like a little map icon, right? And go ahead and save that. And now I'm going to come back to my scene 1, and I'm going to reload the project so we can see that icon updated. Okay, we're back. There's our PlayerSpawn. It's got its handy little icon, so now it's pretty easy to identify in the scene tree. Okay, let's go back to our PlayerSpawn scene and look at our script. Now, obviously, this script doesn't do anything just yet, so we need to build that out. And I've already talked about the things that it needs to do, right? It needs to check to see if we have a player. So when we load the level and there's a player spawn in that level scene, then it's going to check and say, okay, do we have a player? And if not, let's make one. And then if we do, then we can do nothing. We could also in the script destroy this node if we want to. In addition to that, we want to hide it when we're in the game. So maybe let's start with the ready function and address a couple of those things there. And actually I said let's address the ready function. That's really the only function we need. So let's create the ready function. Okay, now in here, what we'll do is the first thing we can do is let's handle the visibility. So I'm going to save this and just run the game real quick because obviously it's visible right now and we don't ever want to see this in game. So the first thing we can do is set the visible to false. Okay, so now if we run the game, it will not display in game. But because this is not a tool script, right? It's not running in the editor. We still will be able to see it here when we're working. Okay. First step done, pretty straightforward and simple, I think. Now, the next thing I want to do is let's just give this an await for the process frame because we want to give the rest of the game a chance to initialize its scripts, or the rest of the level, I should say. So once the level loads, let's give it a frame. So I'm going to say get tree dot process frame, and that's just a signal, right? That we know that one process frame has completed. So we've gone through one loop of the frames in the game. And then we need to do the rest of our code here. And this is actually a really simple node. It's going to be really straightforward. So, I mean, I guess the first thing is we want to check for a player. Now, in the case that we already have a player, technically we don't need to do anything. As I mentioned, if you want to do something, maybe you want to free this or queue free it, or maybe you actually have something in your game where you're like, oh, if the player already exists, then we want to do some other functionality. That's where you would do this, right? Now, alternatively, if we don't find a player in the scene, then we need to instantiate one. Okay, so we can instantiate a new instance of our player scene here in the code. And this is going to be pretty simple. In addition to instantiating the scene, one thing I guess I didn't explicitly mention is wherever we put this spawn point is where we want the player to be placed when he spawned, right? That's the purpose of having the visual. Otherwise, this could just be a node sitting in a tree. But it's obviously important, right, that some levels you might want the player here when if you test a level, or maybe this is like the first screen where you play, or maybe this is the scene where you save and load your game. And so when you load a new game, we'll use this guy to position the player, right? On a new game, where does he load? Right here? Okay, then that's where he'll be. Okay, so let's just start with him over here and we'll test this. So going back to our script, that's one other thing that we need to do. After we instantiate a player, we need to just position the player scene in the level, okay? Now, there are a couple ways that we can check to see if we have a player. One thing that we've already done, if we look at our player scene and look under the node here, okay, so I'm on my player. Under the node settings, we have already assigned him to a group called player, okay? And because of that, we can just check this. Now, we used this previously in the scene transition script, so we're going to use something similar here. And it's very straightforward. So we'll do an if check. And then we're going to grab the tree and use that get first node in group function. If you stuck around previously, you know what this function is. And what we do with this is we provide it. You can see we need to provide a group, which is a string name. And of course, we have a player group, just like that. The reason this can be an if is, let's look at this again, just a quick refresh. This returns the first node. And if not, it returns null. So if it doesn't find a player, then the result will be null. Otherwise, it will be a node. Okay. Now, in here, you could do something to that node if you wanted to. Obviously, this is our condition where we're checking if we already have a player. So that means if it returns something other than null, we know we have a player. Maybe what we want to do is print a message. And then otherwise, we can print a different message down here, right? No player found. And technically, obviously, what we're going to do in the case where we have a player is we'll just return, and we're not going to do anything else in the function. Okay, otherwise we'll say that no player was found. Let's just go ahead and test this. We should see the no player found message when we run our game because we don't currently have a player. Okay, no player found. Oh, and you can see I've got some debug code showing up. Okay, so I've gone ahead and removed my little print statement here that was from my debugging I did prior to this video. Just kind of left that in. So in this case, we need to instantiate a new instance of our player scene. So that's going to be pretty straightforward as well. A couple ways we can get a reference to that scene. We can make a constant reference up here to the player. I think the downside to that is we have to use a preload statement, which means it's going to load the player scene. And if we already have a player, we don't really need it preloaded. So I don't know if this makes a huge difference, but I'm going to just load the player scene down here. What we'll do is we're going to create a new player. And it's of type player, right? We know this is a player of type player. That's the class, the node, the class name that we're using for it. And what we need to do is we just say load, and we need to find our player scene. Now, right now, it's going to kind of give us some ideas of scene paths, and these are resource paths relative to our folder. Alternatively, we could come down here and find our player. And let's see. Yeah, here he is. I can drag and drop this in just like that. I want to show something. If I drag and drop this in and hold control, you can see that when I do this to create a constant, this is the other way we could have had a reference to the player. It gives us this UID, and I actually prefer the UID sometimes. It's more confusing to read, but it has safety built in because if you were to move this file, as long as you did it within Godot or made sure to include the UID little file that is associated with the player, then your project will find it even if you move locations. And it's shorter. So for this purpose, I don't mind doing that. This is not enough to make this work though. So what we're going to do is we're going to load this file, and then we need to create an instance of that scene, because loading it doesn't create an instance. It just kind of like loads it into memory so that you can access it. So we're going to say .instantiate, just like that. And then we just need to do a couple things. When we load it, not only do we need to position the player, but before we can position him, we need him to be part of the scene tree. So we'll say get tree .root, and then we'll say add child. And then we're just going to pass in the player here. So we're just going to make the player a child of our scene root. Now we're ready to position him. And the positioning is going to be really straightforward because this node is designed so that the origin is where his feet are. And that was done to match the setup of our character here. So really, we just need to get this global position and put our player wherever that is, right? So let me go back to the script, and we'll say player.globalPosition equals, and then we just can say global position or self.globalPosition. Self is not required here, but it is nice, especially if you're new, so that it makes sense. Like, how does global position work? Well, that's a property of this node. Okay, so there we go. This should actually load a player. Let's go ahead and test out scene 1. And there we go. Our player was there. And you notice that he dropped down because we spawned him up here, right? And so spawned him in that location. So if we were to come to scene 1, move this guy around, like maybe I do want him to spawn on top of this guy. Now when I run my project, there he is. Player's right there. Now, alternatively, and if we look at our console, the output, you can see it says no player found. Let's go ahead and go to scene 2. Doink. Oh, you know what? That didn't do anything because we haven't placed a player spawn here. So let's come to scene 2 and let's add a player spawn. And it's going to place it at 0, 0, but maybe we want it right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy that and come to scene 3 and paste one in as well. And I'll just place them up here. So let's run scene 3 and see what happens. No player found, so it spawned him at that location. Now, if I jump up to scene 2, it says we have a player. And no player was spawned, right? Now, the reason why this is handy is because it's a little bit simpler to add. It stands out in our scene tree. It's really easy to identify. And now as you're working, you can just have one of these player spawn scenes placed in your level. You're going to want to place it in any level where you want to test, but it's a lot easier to add one of these, in my opinion, than to add a player and remember to remove the player. You know, because eventually you're going to get to a point where you're like, you've got a player in every scene, and if you do something, I feel like that could become problematic. This is a simpler solution to that issue. And as you can see, we didn't get 2 players because we already built code in there to make sure and check for that. So that our player is treated kind of like a singleton style class, right? If there's already one there, we don't need another one. And there we have it. Okay, so that's your player spawn node. All right, so let's just talk a little bit of kind of theory or concepts for building out your levels and kind of testing things. I think it's obvious why this player spawn can be useful, because you can use this. Maybe you want to test a part of a level that you can't easily access, you know, for some reason. You can just place the player spawn there. And now when you run the test scene, that's where your player will appear. And then you can just reset it when you're done. Okay. But in general, you're going to be doing a lot of testing. Now, along those lines, as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, we want to be careful that as we're building out levels, we're not fleshing out the visuals of the level. Really, what you want to start with is kind of the bare bones. You might just use a basic tile map, and that's fine. And maybe you have developed a tile map for the other scenes, but don't put all your effort into polishing the scene like we've done with these across your game until you're confident in the level layout and design. Because if we were to say come back to these and have to make major changes to the level layout because of our game design changes, then we're going to be redoing a lot of work, and that's a lot of time potentially wasted. So what that would look like is really start your scenes really basic. Probably don't put in backgrounds, lighting, any of that stuff unless it's critical to the core functionality or playability of that particular scene. Okay, so just build it with bare minimum. It's maybe called MVP in a lot of situations, minimum viable product. Like, can you play the game, right? And then, of course, what you can do is you can come back at the end and come and do all of the visual polish that you want to every scene. And you could do that as one big pass, or maybe you do that in a couple chunks, you know, something that works and make it more manageable. Not only is this important for preventing rework of stuff over and over, you know, ad nauseum, but even if you say did a chunk, like we've got this chunk right now, and I've called it a vertical slice, and I'm okay with that. I may lose some of the work I've done if I come back and need to revise it. But you can see if you have like 80 levels, that's like a daunting amount of work. But you may find that as you build out your game and you get to the final area, you come up with new concepts, maybe a new visual idea that you want to implement, and maybe you love that idea and you're like, oh shoot, I want to do that back on level 1. It's kind of better to just do that all at once. So you're going to have your end goal in mind, and you're going to be doing some work to get there. And if you've got an artist, they can be developing assets to help you get to that point. Just try and keep kind of a methodical approach to how you're doing this, and be careful that you just don't waste time making a level look beautiful when you still need to build the rest of your game, right? I guess this whole chapter is kind of maybe a little bit of bad practice, but obviously I'm trying to teach skills that you can use to make your own levels beautiful in this chapter. When and where you do them is up to you. Just be smart about it. Now, in addition to that, I think it's important that we make levels, and as we make them, we begin thinking with our abilities in mind. So right now, if I test my game, I have nothing in here that requires me to have like a double jump, right? Like the highest platform maybe is this one, and I can pretty much reach every part of this scene. Hopefully part of your level design as you're working through and mocking things out is adding maybe like a cliff ledge that you can't quite reach from the beginning of the game. And you're like, but I can see there's something glowing up there. Or maybe you can see a treasure chest, right? Knowing beforehand as the designer and developer of this game that the player needs to have the double jump ability. Those things are really good for exploration because they're going to stick in your player's mind. They're going to get double jump and they're going to go, oh man, there's a couple treasure chests I missed, right? I got to go back. I got to go find out what's in those boxes. Like maybe there's some awesome loot. And now you've given a good reason for your player to want to go back, retrace their steps through old levels and try and revisit old areas, okay? So you got to have that in mind while you're doing this. In addition to double jumps, we're going to have in this small version of a game, we're going to have like a roll ability. So like Metroid, where you can turn into a little ball. So we're going to need narrow passages that you can go through. We'll do that soon as we work on this, but start thinking of those as you're laying things out. We're going to need some destructible areas, so like a floor that we can pound into with one of our abilities, and it'll allow us to break it, fall down to previously unreachable areas, and things like that, okay? And this is, again, why it's important to be careful with the visual flare early on, because obviously I've just named a couple things that we haven't done, and they're going to have implications on our level design and maybe even on our art assets, all right? And I would add that as you're working through that problem of placing obstacles and things for the player to explore, think about educating your player about how to play your game, especially if you've developed an ability that's different and distinctly different from any previous Metroidvania, where the player is going to have to learn how this mechanic works, right? You may want to build like very simple puzzles or platforming things or challenges or whatever it is, combat encounters that require a basic use of that ability. And then maybe after a screen or a level or two, you could introduce something that's more advanced, that's going to kind of pique their interest and thinking, oh, how do I solve that problem? Like, I see that I can double jump, but it's also too far. So now I need to be able to jump and dash, right? And then once they have those two abilities, now they're unlocking even more things to explore. So those are all very important while working on your level design and your layout. And this is honestly a skill that I don't feel like S tier at level design. I'm like maybe C tier. I don't know. This is not my strong suit personally. And so it just requires time, some patience, and I would say testing. Get friends to play it, or maybe not friends, maybe get enemies to play it. Find people to help test. Join a Discord community. You'll make friends in there that don't know you well enough to kiss your butt. They'll tell you, hey, that's kind of hard. I didn't like that, whatever. And then you can get valuable feedback from that. And just know that sometimes negative feedback is more valuable than positive feedback. Try not to take it personal. Build up a thick skin. Understand that it's probably coming from a place of interest in your game, right? Because if someone says like, hey, that was dumb, that probably means they really liked your game, but that one thing was frustrating to them. And so if you fix that, they're going to become a big fan of your game. Does that make sense? So work on those items, test it, test your levels, and have fun with it. Now, that's going to be one of your assignments for now. In between now and the time that I begin chapter 3 is to work out more of your levels, hone some of your skills, maybe start developing the sprite sheets and the art assets that you need to support your vision and your goal for your game. So thank you for following along. If you've been following me along since the beginning of the Metroidvania Forge, then I greatly appreciate it. If you like and comment on the videos, that helps YouTube know that it's valuable. And so I hope it is valuable enough that people want to do that. So I appreciate those who do. You can, of course, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be working on chapter 3 next, and I'll drop a video talking briefly about it, probably before I release the prologue. Now, the prologue, like you've seen with my Metroidvania series, is an episode where I'm just going over and reviewing the goals for the whole chapter. So it's kind of a video where we're talking about what we're going to be implementing over the course of, 8 to 10 episodes roughly, and it may vary, but that's what we've done here. This is episode 10, and so I hope you guys are looking forward to that. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get there. In the meantime, I have some other side projects and videos that I do hope to publish, and some things that I'm working on that, if time allows, I'm going to get them out to you. But I'm not going away. I'm not disappearing. It might just be a week, maybe 2 max before you see me again, unless, of course, you're like future somebody who's seeing this a year in the past, and maybe there's like already 50 videos to watch or something awesome like that, then by all means go watch them if you're enjoying them. So thank you everybody for following along. I want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I don't do that every video, but you guys are awesome. I'm trying to give my Patreon supporters a little bit extra for the support that they give me financially. It helps make it possible for me to keep doing this as a busy person with a family. But if you're a pixel adventurer, you've got access to the GitHub repository for this project, and I'm updating that as I go, usually pretty faithfully with each episode. I've had a few busy weeks where I've missed, and so maybe you get a chunk of 2 episodes pushed at once. But that's a perk for pixel adventurers. There is a lower tier, and they still get access to other things from time to time. And I can't spoil exactly what's coming, but I've got some more art assets in the vein of what you're seeing here in the Metroidvania Forge. That's going to be coming in the very near future. That's one of those projects that I've been working on behind the scenes. And so if art assets is something that you're looking for and you're not an artist, then I will have at least an option for you to look at and consider. And so be on the lookout for that in the near future. Again, thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.